Subscribe now and the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Sharing the Scoop. And today is a quite special occasion because I have my lab partner from junior college after 8 to 10 years, Abhijit. So, hi Abhijit, how are you?
I'm good. Yanesh. How have you been?
Good, good. So, Abhijit, can you please introduce yourself for our listeners?
Surely. So, my name is Abhijit Mohapatra, and I'm basically from Bombay. I did my entire schooling education in Bombay, and I did my plus two with Yanesh itself in Ruparel. Post that, I did my engineering at DJ Sanghvi College, which is affiliated to the University of Mumbai. And I did my bachelor's in chemical engineering. And after that, I had a campus placement at Hindustan Unilever, where I worked for about 4 years. After which, I went to ISB Hyderabad for my MBA. Post ISB, I've been working with Swiggy right now, which is an online food delivery platform, for about a year and a half. And I started my role as a city growth manager for the NCR Delhi Gurgaon region. And right now, I am moving into a commercial strategy role within Swiggy. So that is my brief introduction to all of y'all listening in on this class today.
Okay, okay. So, Abhijit, you said that you did your chemical engineering from DJ Sanghvi. You worked for 4 years. And from there, I mean, from chemical engineer to doing an MBA from ISB Hyderabad. How did that happen?
So when I started working in HUL, I was working in the R&D department, the global product development department. So my work was closely associated with looking at molecules and formulations and working on the chemistry of detergent powders. That was the department that I worked in. So I was part of the global Surf Excel team. As part of my role in HUL, I had a lot of interaction with people from different departments, marketing, sales, supply chain, and the factory manufacturing teams. Across my interactions with all of these teams, I realized that there is a certain learning that comes in when you have a broader general management awareness of what you're working on. When I was in R&D, I had a domain expertise or an understanding of that area. But when I spoke to the marketing guys and the supply chain team members, most of whom were MBAs, I realized that that side of the work was very exciting for me. And I wanted to explore that a little bit more. So I spoke to a few people, I spoke to seniors within the department, and I also spoke to family friends, and I got an understanding of what is the objective of an MBA and whether it will be suitable for me. And over the I think right about very early on, actually, I was pretty convinced that that would be my next step. So my objective was then focused on getting into a good business school program. And when I was in HUL, I saw most of the students or most of my colleagues were students from top business schools. And I was also hoping that I get a chance to do that. So that's where my initial journey of moving from a chemical engineering to an MBA role began.
Okay, okay. And obviously you said that a lot of your colleagues are from the top B schools, and hence you also wanted to explore that side and wanted to pursue the career there. But so which are the exams that you had written apart from, I mean, ISB obviously takes GMAT, but
Mhm.
and how you used to prepare because you had a full-time work schedule, how you used to manage your studies, because that is very important. You cannot the other aspect of, the things also.
Correct. I will answer this question in two parts because my MBA preparation was split between two different sections. Right when I started working itself, I realized that MBA was an area that I was definitely looking forward to within the next few years itself. And in my head, the earlier I made the transition, the more it seemed appropriate for me. However, when I started out with my MBA preparation, my objective was to go into the top IIMs. That was my dream schools. And hence, I focused my energy on giving the CAT and the Indian competitive exams. So I gave the CAT, I gave the XAT, I've also given the NMAT, I gave the and I've also given, I think,
IFT.
yes, I gave the IFT exam as well. So my focus obviously was on the CAT exam, and I gave the exam. So I graduated in 2014 from engineering, and From that period until 2017, I gave my CAT every single year. However, I was very, very keen on trying to get into a good business school, and I was focused. My dream and my desire was to get into a top MBA program in the country. So, and my scores were typically around the 96 percentile, and I wasn't crossing into the 98, 99 percentile at that point of time. So after a couple of years, when I got into a few programs, but I wasn't hitting the top IIMs, I looked at the ISB preparation side. And that's when the phase 2 of my MBA preparation began, wherein I worked on improving my GMAT score. And I basically gave the GMAT exam. I gave it twice. I gave it the first time very quickly, which I think was a mistake, and then I gave a little bit of preparation, and I gave it after a couple of months of preparation, and that's basically how I split the two sections in. So
In
the
terms
first
of
part was more CAT ZAT focused, and the second part of my MBA prep was more GMAT focused, which was a much shorter period because I had learnings from my earlier phase as well.
true. Obviously, the syllabus overlaps 80 to 90%. Correct. Okay, great. And since you said that you had even converted some of the programs, but obviously they were not from one of your dream programs that you were targeting. So obviously, in the ISB interview, which is the second stage of selection, that experience of the first few years of clearing the rounds of GDPI and VAT-PI
Yes.
rather would have also
Yes.
helped you in the ISB part, right? So can you
Immense.
also tell us a little bit more about those two journeys, like how it
Right.
was for ZAT programs which you converted and you had appear for the GDPI, VAT-PI, and same, you can do the comparison for ISB Hyderabad also, if you can.
Surely. So I would say that the GDPI experience for so let me give a little bit more background. So I gave the CAT and I used to score around 96, 97 percentile. That was the maximum I got to, and my scores used to usually hover around that. And when it came to my ZAT, again, the scores were just about enough for me to get calls to XLRI, and also, so in totality, I gave my GDPIs for the new IIMs, for XLRI, for MDI Gurgaon, for IMT Ghaziabad, and through a different examination for NMIMS. Most of these, I converted courses in most of these, in all of these colleges. But at that time, I was keen to try for one more year and give it a shot. And because I had time on my side, I also considered doing that. So right now, when it comes to the GDPI experience, my objective is very simple and very clear. And I will break it into two sections. One is the GD on the written ability, and the other is the personal interview. For a GD and a PI, my objective was to ensure that I'm up to date with broadly what is happening in the current news times right now. So one way to do that, which is interesting, is look at good YouTube channels, right? You can look at, for international news, you can look at Last Week Tonight by John Oliver. You can look at, you can find a few more international comedians who do interesting news bits. So they're entertaining as well as they give you a very good overview of what is happening across in the Western world, right? You can also try listening to some podcasts on Spotify. FinShots is a good one, and you will also find other tools that are available these days, which were not in my earlier times. At that time, I focused primarily on YouTube for an entertainment and an education perspective. Apart from that, I would read the newspaper occasionally, and I would try and keep my eyes and ears open on any topic that I came across. And I would do a quick Wikipedia, mostly out of personal interest. I'm a curious person by nature. So I would do a quick Wikipedia to understand what that is about. If it's a new movie, who is the actor, or if it's a new, a new development that's happened in the current affairs, what does it change? Okay, new business leader has come in. I would do a quick Google and a video Wikipedia check to understand a little bit more. So the objective of the ideal preparation for a GDPI should be no preparation before the date of the GDPI, in my opinion. The objective for you should be to be calm, should have sensible points, should be not overbearing or rude to your peers in the group discussion. The objective from a recruiter point of view or the selector's point of view should always be kept in mind, which is that anybody who's coming to shortlist students from a GDPI is looking for future leaders or future applicants or admits to the MBA program, which means all of these students should have an ability to listen well, should have an inherent leadership quality that they're able to demonstrate in this GDPI, which can be demonstrated in two ways. One is by ensuring you have relevant points, and two is by subtly guiding the GDPI, the GD discussion in a particular direction. So if you feel you're part of a GD and you've spoken a few times and somebody else hasn't spoken, it's okay to ask that person to speak without making it accusatory or without trying to put that other person down. If you're genuinely trying to get everybody's voice heard, if you're able to make a few sensible points without screaming, without cutting other people across, but being firm, that is the best way to present your GD. This, if you don't have it innately, will come with practice. So my suggestion is do it with your friends who are also interested in giving your MBA exams. Also, if you're part of any coaching classes or if you're going for any test preparation, that is another fantastic tool for you to take part and do mock GDs and PIs. I did a few myself and I found them to be very useful. From a VAT perspective, again, the process of preparation is nothing before the exam immediately. Try and keep your current affairs and your curiosity high. If you're curious in life, that's a good enough basic metric for you to do well in any of these WPIs, your VATs as well as your GDs. If you have to prepare right before any of these big days, and you generally feel like doing so because you're a little nervous, my suggestion would be to focus on reading the newspaper, getting an understanding of what are the broad topics that are happening. In these times, it's obvious that there'll be COVID, there will be talks on economy, there will be talks on how are new ways of work happening, work from home policies, if you're talking from an economic perspective. From a larger perspective, it can also be on ecological points. What is the environmental impact of how things are happening right now? Or topics can even be abstract, right? I remember there was a GDPI where the question was whether blue is better than red. And it is left to the imagination of all the students on what you want to say. The objective there is simply to test how quickly and how innovatively can a student think, and how do they get scared or uncomfortable with unusual questions, right? So the objective here is to keep yourself calm, do some general preparedness, read a little bit before the GD and the VAT, and that's good enough from my perspective. For the PI, the process will remain roughly the same from a general knowledge perspective. The only addition you will do is you will read your resume or your application form very thoroughly before you go for a PI. In the PI, they will obviously have an idea of what your extracurriculars. Second, what is your course program been like? What have you studied? If you're an engineering student, you're an architecture student, you're a commerce student, you're a BSc student, right? Or you've done a BA, any course that you've done, what is your understanding of your course? Prepare one answer for what is your best subject and have an understanding of that. What are the projects that you've done? Have an understanding of that. What were your extracurriculars? What did you do? Did you have an opportunity to demonstrate leadership? These are key things that will help you showcase to the admissions team, showcase to the panelists that you are a serious candidate who is responsible, takes interest in whatever they're doing right now, and is dedicated and disciplined. And that discipline can be shown across different spheres. It can be from an academic perspective where you show that you have a favorite subject and you understand that well. Or it can be a very deep interest in an extracurricular activity. It might be that you've done a lot of theater, you've played a lot of sports, anything that showcases your interest in a particular sphere and domain, right? And finally, when you're applying for your MBA, you should be very, very clear on why do you want to go for it. If you're going in with a herd mentality, it will become difficult for you to explain to yourself later on. The objective is not to only prove to the admissions committee or the selectors or the panelists. It is to prove to yourself. You're doing a final postgraduate degree for your own career improvement. And if you're not convinced about it, then it doesn't make sense for you to do it. So to all the students who are listening into this call, my recommendation would be that You give it a thought. Everybody doesn't need an MBA. And if you think you need an MBA, give it a good shot. Give yourself a thorough understanding of what are the pros and cons of doing it. I personally, having gone through the course, have found it useful, but everybody has a different career aspiration. So be clear. And with that clarity and with this level of preparation, a GD and PI should be a smooth sailing for any of y'all.
Amazing inputs actually, Abhijit. And basically, so what were the challenges that you have faced in your journey so far? Because I'm sure there would have been plenty, because working
Absolutely.
for 4 straight years, then giving the multiple attempts to the different MBA exams, then switching altogether from CAT to GMAT. These would have been definitely some of the biggest challenges that you would have faced. But still, is there anything that you want to add to that?
I would say that the most important thing, once you've decided that you want to do an MBA program, is to have a sense of self-confidence. What happens, and having given the CAT and the ZAT so many times, every year you add an additional pressure to yourself. It happens in any competition exam. You talk to a UPSC applicant, he will say the same. You talk to a CAT applicant, he will say the same. You talk to an IIT JEE applicant or a top law program or a medical test preparation guy, everybody will say the same. The fundamental objective of these competitions or these competitive examinations is to be a process of elimination, right? And it is at the end of the day some sort of a game. That is the best analogy that you can put. There are certain rules to this game, and if you understand the rules quickly and you're able to score well on the game, you're sorted. I had a friend of mine who scored 100 percentile in his CAT in one of the years that I gave it. And I asked him, yeah, how did you do it? How did you manage to score that high? And the difference in his preparation and mine was black and white. He said, Abhijit, preparation is about identifying what are the question type that will come in the exam, having in your head a solution to each type. Agar if it's a problem on, say, ratios, I know, okay, this is the type of problem on ratios. This is the things that I need to do for ratio problems. And then I just have to apply the formula and move on. If it's a problem on probability, I have to look at the question, understand that it's a probability question, understand that identify that these are ABC techniques to solve that probability problem, and I'm done. Every question in a competitive exam is just a two-stage process of one, identifying what is the subject area that it's covering, and two, for that subject area, you would have definitely solved a question and identified that this is the subtype of question it is, and it's a simple question of plugging and playing. This friend of mine who scored 100 percentile in his CAT had put in a lot of effort in understanding the two processes. So I knew that if he gave the exam again, he would again get 100 percentile because he had the process set and he had understood the rules of the game very well. For me, that process was broken up for two reasons. One is I was very nervous about giving the exam, and I had a lot of test prep anxiety, and a lot of people have that. You have to face it, and you have to realize that it's not unusual. It is very common. It is okay to have it, and if you do have it, it doesn't mean you cannot do well in your exams. So when you're doing these preparations, remember that your work should be, you should be a smart worker. And a lot of people say, yeah, you should study smart, but not study hard. I will tell what I mean when I say study smart. Study smart in this place, in a competitive exam, is to try and remember that if you have a time limit, a 3-hour window for a particular exam, you know how much time you have for every question, and you have to stick to that time period. When I started doing my preparation for my GMAT later on, I got a 730 in my GMAT, just for context. When I started doing my GMAT preparation later on, I would keep my phone on the screen, on the table, and I would start a stopwatch. And when I did my tests, after solving every question, if I'm doing 30 MCQs, I would tick one question, and the moment I'm done, I would press lap on the stopwatch. So by the end of that 30 questions that I've done, I've seen how much time I've taken in total and how much time I'm taking for each question, because I have the lap time for each question. That would help me understand where I'm becoming slow and where I'm becoming fast. The objective of giving this example is to tell you that you need to understand how to improve on your areas of weakness. It's a game at the end of the day. How many times you play the level will depend on how quickly you understand what the rules of the game are. Keep it at that analogy. When you're preparing for any question, focus on understanding what is the type of question and what is it that they're trying to solve. Right? Listen to blogs and podcasts and follow industry leaders. I remember Career Launcher has a blog. A lot of other top leading consultants and test prep teams also have very nice videos, blogs, and their material. If you are part of a particular agency or a part of a particular test group, please reach out to them and see if they have any content available on test strategy. That is a very important tool to help you plan your thought process. Acknowledge your mental makeup. Play smart in terms of how you are planning your exam from a timing perspective, from identifying the question, from trying to prepare shortcuts in your own head, which will help you solve a particular question that you've identified, right? Don't worry too much about getting the game perfectly done. Perfection is never necessary. And that is the real life lesson that a lot of people don't learn. Even if you get into a top IIM, right? Even if you're the rank one at IIM Ahmedabad and you start working after that, life is never going to be 100% perfect for you, even if you're that individual. So you need to understand that that same principle applies for your MBA test prep as well. That you're not aiming for perfection, you're aiming for a great score. And when you put that grade, you have a certain leeway for failing. And that is very important. Even the 100 percentiler doesn't get 100%. He gets the best among everybody else. And that is your focus. You have to ensure that you're doing your best. You are okay to have a few failures. And that is the mentality and approach to keep. And always remember that this is not the end of it. If you feel that you're not doing that well in this, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a great career or you cannot have a great life. This is one of the 100 avenues available in 2020. And in future, you will have more opportunities and ways to grow your careers. So keep that in perspective and never let it get overbearing or stressful, because that defeats the purpose. I can say that after getting stressed for 4 straight years. When I took that pressure off my head, and that pressure moved off my head when I decided to give the GMAT. Because in my head, GMAT was an international exam. यार ये तो simpler होगा. It's not like CAT. 1 लाख लोग एक दिन में नहीं दे रहे हैं. वो stress नहीं था. The moment that stress went away, I did much better and I got into ISB in my first try because I didn't put that load on my head. My effort remained. The discipline of trying to get your score better remained. But the other mental जो बोझ मैं डाल रहा था वो हट गया था. All of y'all should remember that a test preparation will depend very strongly on how well you keep your mental cool. That is a big competitive advantage. If you are much more calm versus the nearby test takers sitting on the left and right of you, even if all of you have prepared equally well, you have a better chance of doing well in the exam because you are going to look at every question with a calm head, unlike the panicky two sitting next to you. So keep that in mind.
We often actually say that this is as much as the test of your mental strength as of of your subject skills also. So people tend to forget that. People tend to forget that. They need to understand that from day one itself. Okay. Moving to the next part of the question. Why ISB? Why did you decide to go ahead with ISB? And what are the things that only a ISB student can tell us, which we will not understand from anywhere else? Obviously the good things.
Surely. So yeah, for me, ISB was always in my radar, even when I was applying for IIMs. But the only reason I didn't focus on ISB very early on was the application process is very different, and you need to have a slightly different approach to like apply for an ISB program. And and the other thing is, of course, you need to have a minimum of 2 years of work experience. So I had anyways not given it a thought very early on in my career because I realized that if I'm getting into a good IIM, I may not need to go down that path. As I became eligible for ISB and I started looking up the course program, I realized it is actually very, very well tuned to what I was looking for. I wanted a fully residential program. I wanted to stay in a college which has very, very good international faculty and a very good teaching experience. I wanted people from different walks of life. I wanted my class to be very diverse. I wanted to have I would say, a great networking opportunity. And I obviously wanted to ensure that I get a good job. Because if all of this doesn't lead to a good job, you're in trouble. For
Obviously,
me,
obviously.
ISB seemed to fit all of these bills. I was a kid who was based in Mumbai, and I wanted to stay in a fully residential program, and ISB did that. It was a 1 year program, so it took me off the workforce for a shorter period than a 2 year program at any of the other IIMs or any of the other good business schools in India. Uh, and when I spoke to alumni, and when I went for the admissions, they have an admissions counseling fair that happens across the year. I think nowadays in the COVID period they do it online and they do it virtually. But in the earlier days, they used to do it in major cities across the year. So you can meet the faculty, you can meet the admissions committee, and you can get an understanding on what the course is like. When I went for one of those and I spoke to the alumni, I found the course to be very interesting and very appropriate for me. It was like an international experience in India without the international price tag. Of course, the ISB course is still a pretty premium program, but I would say the student loan affairs and all of that are very, very well sorted. So it doesn't really affect an individual from I would say, from planning their career perspective. It's not a hindrance. So my ISB journey, my ISB preparation seriously began uh, a year before I got in, which is around 2017. My objective was to have a very strong application. And ISB has essays that you have to write. You have to write 2 essays, and you have to have a GMAT score. So the first thing that I had to get out of the way was ensure that my GMAT is sorted. So I gave my first GMAT exam almost a month or so after I got my CAT result, because I was a little frustrated and I thought I just want to get done with it. I scored a 690 in that. And it was a decent score, but given that ISB was my top school preference, I wanted to play a little bit more safe. So I prepared for a few more months, and work was also getting very hectic at that point of time. And I gave my second attempt I gave it a couple of months later, and I scored a 730. My split was I scored a 40 in my verbal and a 50 in my quant. And so that was the GMAT aspect. Then I spent about a month and a half preparing for my essays and my application process, and I submitted that. Post to shortlisting, the ISB interview happened. We hadn't discussed the earlier interview journeys, and I'll give you a quick overview across all the interviews that I gave, ending with the ISB one. So I would say the interviews can be very idiosyncratic. It can be very unique because it depends on the mind of the interviewer. So I have given interviews for XLRI where it was a stress interview, and I gave another interview for XLRI the next year, which was not a stress interview, which was a very free flowing conversation where I could put in my points across very well. My interviews with NMIMS were again very free flowing. They were not stress inducing. Questions were mostly around my resume, because by that time I had a certain level of work experience, and about my academic experience before that in my engineering days, and also about my future goals in ISB, future goals post my MBA. Sorry. So most of my interviews after a year or two of experience had these three components. And obviously, if there was something very local or some news that was picking up at that point of time, if that conversation came up, they would ask for an opinion on that particular thing. The case in point for XLRI, there was a Volkswagen international scandal that had come up uh, during the
Yeah.
time in which I was giving the interview, and a question or two was posed on that. And I remember that they were not very satisfied with my answer, or they displayed very strong displeasure on my answers. So different interviewers have a different objective. My approach on how do you present yourself in an interview is just to be yourself, be calm, be composed, and always be polite and never get defensive or argumentative with your interviewers. Your objective is to present your opinion and your point of view and not argue about it, but not to be overbeared or afraid of putting across a point. That is the broad advice I would give to any student giving the interviews, right? Keep your points clear, talk slowly, don't take your time. A lot of people, when an interview are very scared and nervous and they will immediately blurt out an answer. It's a very common tendency. I also learned that after giving a few, that you don't have to blurt out an answer. After a question comes in, take a second, take 2 seconds, nobody's going to mind, and then give your answer. That a second or two pause can really help your slow thinking and your rational thinking kick in, and your answers will be more sensible and thought out, right? So coming to my ISB interview, the experience was very similar to a lot of my other interviews, wherein they focused on what my career journey was like, why did I want to do an MBA, and it was a very conversational style of an interview, wherein I focused on giving out what are the key things that were unique about me, and this was linked to my application form, because a lot of the questions for ISB are also directed from the application form, because you have your essays and a lot of your interviewers will ask you questions based on that. So while the first half of it was more standardized, the questions on why your MBA or what is unique about you, these are questions that came in very specifically from the ISB admission process and had questions in the essays as well. So that was something that is slightly more different from an ISB experience versus the others. The process, again, is not stress interview. You will always have a panelists. It'll be 2, 3. I think the max that I've had is 3, and in most cases it is between 2 or 3, right? For ISB, they have a template of having a professor and a few alumni, so that it's a good mix between faculty as well as industry point of views. They're rarely, if ever, stress interviews or conversations that are designed to put a candidate under stress or worry. They're always conversational and free flowing, and even my experience was somewhat similar. So my ISB interview experience was pleasant, and when I finally got shortlisted for the course, coming to your question on what makes ISB very unique, the one thing that I found very fascinating and very different is that ISB will treat all its students as adults. There is very little restrictions on how to conduct yourself on curfews or meeting friends across in your campus, because they realize that by the time people come to campus, and because our batch had people with at least 2 years to almost 20 years of experience in the class, there was no objective of telling students what to do. It is more self-motivated. The program doesn't focus very heavily on academics, but at the same time, it does focus on academics, but they leave the focus of how important it is to you. If you feel that it is extremely important for you to focus on academics, because certain kind of roles, if it's a consulting career that you want at a McKinsey, a Bain, or a BCG, you will need the academic rigor. Whereas if you want careers in different areas, then you need a certain academic, a good academic score, but you will also need to showcase your strength in different areas, whether it is case competitions, whether it is some projects that you've done, or if your college has internship opportunities. Through your internship opportunities, demonstrate your interest and your will. So ISB, as in that perspective, was very whole-rounded. Other really interesting aspects for me were my exchange program and an international student conference that I went to. So as part of my course, I had the opportunity to go on an international exchange to China. And thankfully, I went 1 year before COVID kicked in, because I was in Beijing for 2 months. And that exposure was outstanding, because you get to understand a different country and a culture from within their education environments, which is never something you will experience as a tourist. So that was one of the unique experiences that I had. And of course, an international student conference that I went to Sydney, in Australia, which was again a unique experience to talk to MBA students from across the world and see how well we fit in and what are the benefits or the disadvantages that an Indian program has versus an international cohort. From a course perspective and from an actual living on campus life, ISB is an extremely brilliant campus to stay on. I was in the Hyderabad campus. And for a lot of students who don't know, ISB doesn't differentiate between the Hyderabad and the Mohali campus. Even from an interview perspective, when recruiters come in, they're not explicitly told which campus the student is from, because a lot of people outside of the college have an opinion that one campus is better than the other, one campus is older than the other. But that depends on the preference of the candidate, or depends on what the college wants to fit in. So there is no academic or a segregation between better students and worse students across. It is a mixed bag. So I was in the Hyderabad campus, and campus was really, really nice. It is the hostels, or the quads as they're called for us, were really, really well maintained, and the quality of service is really, really nice. You have people who will come and clean your rooms. Hostel experience was barely like a hostel; it was more like a serviced apartment. So I think that made life a great fun, and
much easier, of course.
much easier. Yes. And finally, from an academic perspective, we had great faculty. We had faculty from around the world, and that was a great exposure, because you would see professors from top business schools come and give you their perspective on new business insights. My final course on ISB was taught by the chief knowledge officer from NASA. So it was a very unique experience to see somebody from that sort of an industry come and give you a class on managing complexities and working in a different environment. So the education experience was outstanding. The college stay experience was amazing. Peer group was very intelligent, diverse. You would sit in the lawns and talk to some really smart people. And also, because ISB has a very strong connection across the industry as well as in the area, it was a great networking opportunity. We saw a lot of very senior leaders come onto campus as part of the ISB Leadership Summit that is hosted by the students, of which I was also a part of. So we spoke to very, very senior politicians, very senior business leaders, very seniors, very interesting and raging social media stars. So it was it was an eye-opening experience, because you don't get that sort of exposure when you're not in a great business school program. I mean, you get it across different programs. I would say it's an experience you get in any good educational program.
Exactly. That's why everybody wants to have the best, obviously, because of all these small things which people don't realize earlier. Anyway, so at the end of it now, what is the advice that you have for the people who are preparing again for this year's MBA entrances, and you have seen it on the both the sides, Indian entrances also and the GMAT part also, and year after year you continuously prepared, and how did you kept going?
So I think the fundamental thing for me was I was very clear that I wanted to do an MBA, and that is, I think, that is something that gave me the conviction to try year after year, after making a few converts and after pushing forward to try and get better with the score. My advice to any applicant is very simple. It is, you should be very clear on why you think it is a good idea to to go for an MBA, and if you're convinced about it, try and give it your best shot. Every career has ups and downs, right? And every journey of preparation will have its ups and downs in the process. So the idea is not to get too stressed about it. The idea is to try and do your best. And if you keep that approach in your mind, that I will do the best that I can, and whatever I get is the right thing for me, that is the best approach to have for an MBA course or any competitive exam. Because what you have in your hand is your effort and your mental fortitude and your mental peace. If you are calm and you give it your best shot and you've tried your best, there is nothing else you need to do. And you are not to waste your time thinking about how ABC did it or why Z is doing better than you in the mock tests. Irrelevant. And the easier and the more the the better you ingrain that thought in your mind, the easier the experience will be for you. It's hard, but it's better to focus on your own learning and your own development and be clear on why you want to do it. And if you're not sure, ask around, get confidence, get more conviction about it, and then you'll be able to do a much better job. It's a fun experience. So I would request all of y'all, whoever is listening into this, to not get worried, to not take stress about how this journey is going to be. Enjoy the ride, because like I said at the beginning, it's a game that you need to understand. And the best way for you to game the system or understand the rules of this is going to make the process much more enjoyable, fun, and rewarding.
Fair enough. So Abhijit, thank you so much for your time and all the very best for all your future aspirations. And thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. All the best to everyone. Thank you again, Yanesh, for hosting me and having this lovely conversation.
Bye
Good
bye.
day.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.